The MAGA movement is eating itself alive. In Texas, Republicans are locked in one of the ugliest primaries in the country with scandals, fraud accusations, and political and personal attacks, a full blown civil war over who's the most MAGA. And the most alarming part is, or the surprising part for the Trump base, is Trump is completely silent on it. He has taken the sidelines. He's not weighing in on who is the most MAGA, who would be the best for their movement that they're building. Instead, he's a little preoccupied with trying to control elections themselves. Meanwhile, trust in American democratic institutions is deteriorating in both political parties. And this really is signaling and a warning sign of what the country is headed towards and the continued deterioration of democratic institutions. In Texas, Republicans are battling in what many are calling the wildest primary in America. These candidates aren't arguing about policy. It's not about who's going to be a better executive or leader for their respective constituents. It is about attacking each other's loyalty to Trump. And the scandals are intense. There is an impeached attorney general that's involved, a fraud settlement, messy personal controversies about divorce drama, and accusations of doxing political opponents. This is not about governing. This is a loyalty contest over who can be the biggest cheerleader for Donald Trump. This article from the Daily Beast highlights it even more. MAGA civil war breaks out in America's wildest primary. Donald Trump is staying uncharacteristically on the sidelines for what will be one of the most contentious primaries of 2026 as voting kicks off in Texas. Voters in the state began heading to the polls on Monday to cast ballots ahead of their primary, where there's fierce competition among both Republicans and Democrats to become the Senate nominees. Whoever clinches the nominations could end up in a high stakes matchup come November, with the once deep red Senate seat on the line. Perhaps why the usually boisterous president is avoiding getting into the fury. Texas Attorney General and MAGA diehard Ken Paxton is running to unseat Senator John Cornyn, who has held the seat since 2002. Rep. Wesley Hunt is also running in the race. Despite bringing a truckload of personal baggage to the race, Paxton has defied political norms, much like Trump, and has a slight edge in the primary against establishment candidate Cornyn, according to recent polls. The University of Houston poll of likely Texas Republican primary voters last week showed him with 38% to Cornyn's 31%. Hunt was polling at 17%. Paxton, who has served as a top Texas law enforcement officer since 2015, has painted himself a conservative defender of Texas values, running to the take on Washington establishment, but his personal life has become quite messy. Paxton's wife, State Senator Angela Paxton, filed for divorce on biblical grounds last July, accusing her husband of adultery before asking the court to have the records sealed. The move was challenged by a series of organizations and media groups, and despite the Paxtons fighting to keep them secret, the records were unsealed late last year. Further filings will be public, but the initial unsealing did not shed more light on Paxton's alleged affair. At the same time, Paxton was impeached by the GOP led Texas House in 2023 on charges of bribery, abuse of public trust, and obstruction, but he was acquitted by the Texas Senate that September. He also cut a deal in 2024 to avoid standing trial on multiple felony fraud charges. At the same time, Hunt is now accusing Cornyn's team of doxing after a staffer included his address in a now deleted post that accused the congressman of voter fraud. A new version of the post redacted the information, but it led to both challengers teaming up to attack Cornyn in the final days before early voting began. Where all three candidates have been on the same page, though, is touting their ties to the president and trying to out MAGA each other as images of them with Trump plaster their websites and social media. Trump was asked about his endorsement plan in the three-way Texas GOP primary as he made his way back to Washington from Florida late on Monday. I just haven't made a decision on the race yet. It's got a ways to go, and I haven't, Trump told reporters, despite voting getting underway. I like all three of them. Donald Trump can't make up his mind. It's just too good of a choice. We have people that are going through divorce drama who have been impeached by the GOP led House. We have Cornyn, who's been an establishment Republican, who clearly the MAGA base is not vibing with. And we have Hunt, someone who's accusing Cornyn of doxing. It's just, it's so funny to me. These are the top tier candidates in Donald Trump's mind. You just can't make a decision. They're all too good. I mean, this is a predictable pattern. It's what happens when you make a demagogue the central figure of your political movement. Donald Trump is the one who decides who wins Republican primaries. And that's why this is not a fight about issues or policies. They're pretty indistinguishable on what policies they support. It's really just a test of What is Donald Trump's support in this current moment? Is he pro tariff? I'm pro tariff. Is he signaling that he's loosening tariffs? Oh, obviously he loves free trade. He's a capitalist warrior. They really don't care what the actual policy is. It's just, will this win me favor in President Trump's eyes? Because Trump's endorsements usually are what lead to candidates winning in Republican primaries. But right now, he's staying neutral. That's because he doesn't want to alienate half of his base. We're seeing that in races like Florida gubernatorial race with James Fishback versus Byron Donalds. Trump has already endorsed Donalds, and a large part of the young MAGA movement is coalescing around internet groypers like James Fishback. Trump isn't managing the movement anymore, he's managing his own political power. And while Republicans fight over personalities in Texas, something surprising has happened. Texas Democrat Taylor Remmett flips Republican state Senate seat. Trump won by 17 points. Democrat Taylor Remmett flipped a reliably Republican state Senate district in Texas in Saturday's special election. This was earlier this month, continuing a string of surprise victories for Democrats across the U.S. in this year since Donald Trump returned to the White House. The Republican president immediately distanced himself from the loss in a district he won by 17 points in 2024. I'm not involved in that. That's a local Texas race, Donald Trump told reporters Sunday at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. Yet just a day before the race, Trump had heaped praise on Republican contender Leigh Wamsgnass, a conservative activist and entrepreneur, on his social media platform, declaring she would be a great candidate and has my complete and total endorsement. A longer post came later in which he urged Texans to get out and vote, describing Wamsgnass as a successful entrepreneur and an incredible supporter of his Make America Great Again movement. So Trump is distancing himself. It really is a matter of heads I win, tails I wasn't involved. Like when they do win, Donald Trump really wants to take credit for that victory. When candidates lose, this was a local race. I had nothing to do with it. Don't read into my endorsement that I just said like a week ago. That wasn't me. I'm not involved. It's not about me. This person would have won if they had my endorsement. It is just a denial of reality. But this difference in strategy for the Texas primary is signaling that Trump recognizes that his rhetoric and his endorsements are losing across the country. So they're changing tactics. Instead of trying to court new voters and build their electoral coalition, Donald Trump is trying to take over elections themselves. These are a series of tweets that he put on his own Truth Social last night. I love the headline of this. Relentless Trump 79 fires off ominous late night election posts. Donald Trump has issued a warning as vague as it is sinister about this year's battle for control over the House and Senate. Crooked elections cannot be allowed in the USA, the 79-year-old president posted on Truth Social just before 11 p.m. Tuesday. His declaration came in response to a clip from Dan Bongino's podcast, in which the former FBI deputy director interviewed John Solomon, founder of pro-Trump outlet Just the News. Crooked elections cannot be allowed in the USA, President DJT. This is Donald Trump, like, what is it, re-truthing? How do you even say it? He's truth posting. He's post-truthing. He said, I will be the one to shut it down with laser eyes. I love that this is the president of the United States, like shit posting at 11 p.m. It really makes me feel secure about the state of our country. He also posted a link to an article in which Georgia State Senator Greg Dolezal told reporters it is time for the state to step in before the 2026 general election to ensure that we can have free and fair elections. Trump has repeatedly pushed baseless claims that nefarious powers intervened in the 2020 vote to thwart his reelection campaign and deliver victory for Joe Biden. In fact, Biden won with a 56.9% share of the Electoral College and a 51.3% share of the national popular vote. Since assuming office for the second time last year, Trump has launched a concentrated campaign to root out and punish those he believes to be responsible for stealing the election. So, this change fits into the broader Trump election strategy. If you can't build your political coalition and actually convince voters that you are the right choice, it's better to just limit who's able to vote in general, at least in the mind of Donald Trump. They are trying to take over federal and state election processes. And this rhetoric is escalating quickly. This clip shows Senator Mike Rounds from South Dakota explaining what the Republican strategy is for the midterm elections.
Out there wondering about it, you take out your driver's license, and if you got a little yellow star up on the right-hand corner, means you've already got your real ID in place. That's all you need to be able to go in and vote. That's all we're asking is let's see a photo ID to make sure You are who you say you are. Makes perfect common sense.
Again, this is the same side that cried about like making sure that you're vaccinated in a public space while there's a global pandemic happening. That is fascism. But showing my little yellow star in order to have a say in my own democratic process, that is somehow justified. That's okay. Voting is considered like a sacred right in this country. That's part of living in a representative democracy. Is we want to extend the amount of people who participate in that process, so it is a reflection of a majority of the people who live here. Our electoral system has implications on what people's lives look like. People should have a say in what that is. They're not going to have all of the say. That's the point of democratic majority, but they should have some say to begin with. And any barrier that we're putting up has to have substantial justification in order to implement. And we're not seeing fraud as a metric that deserves this type of draconian policy. And it's not just Democrats who are losing trust in electoral institutions. Confidence in elections is dropping everywhere, even among Republicans. According to new data, Republicans are increasingly believing that elections are rigged by fraud. Democrats are increasingly fearing intimidation and voter suppression. And nearly half of voters said that the idea of ICE presence near polling stations makes them less confident about voting. This article from the Daily Beast shows that voter trust in elections nosedives as Trump ramps up attacks. This chart compares election confidence from post 2024 election to today. 82% of Republicans were satisfied with the post 2024 election. Shocker. They absolutely guaranteed the 2024 election was stolen. Joe Biden stole the election from Donald Trump. But after Donald Trump wins again, yes, we finally have election integrity back. Love to see it. But today, that has dropped to 65%. Only 65% of Republicans trust election integrity. That speaks to what Donald Trump's rhetoric is doing amongst his own base. He won the election. He's president in the United States, but he continues to sow seeds of doubt in election integrity to begin with. And that is causing Republicans to nosedive in election confidence. Democrats also have dropped from 77% to 64%, and independents have had the most dramatic shift from 73% to 57%. The co director for the UC San Diego Center for Transparent and Trusted Elections, Tad Kosser, said that everyone, Democrats, Republicans, independents alike, have become less trusting of elections over the last year. He called it a parallel movement in a polarized era. The reasons Americans are losing trust in elections differ sharply along party lines. Lauren Prather, co director of a recent survey, noted that about half of Republicans cited fears over mail ballots and non citizen voting, while nearly a quarter of Democrats worried that eligible voters could be prevented from casting ballots due to intimidation or fear. Those concerns are being amplified by political and federal actions. Trump and other Republican leaders have repeatedly claimed, without evidence, that mail in ballots led to widespread fraud and that non citizens are voting in U.S. elections. Democrats and voting experts, meanwhile, warn of potential voter disenfranchisement, citing stricter election laws and intimidation tactics. Recent developments have intensified the debate. Some Trump allies have suggested ICE agents could be stationed at polling places. Both sides think that the system is broken, but for completely different reasons. And while neither sides trust elections entirely, this is what happens when democratic systems start to destabilize. This sharp decline in election trust and confidence should be worrying to both Democrats and Republicans. And if Democrats want to regain control of Congress, of the executive, of different judiciaries, they need to run on an agenda that inspires people to participate again. What we saw with Zoran Mamdani in New York, where he was able to garner an army of volunteers, over 100,000 people who were ready to take to the streets advocating on his behalf because they believed in his economic agenda. That needs to happen. You can no longer run campaigns that are anti Donald Trump. It's not just we're better than the Republicans. Look how crazy these guys are. You have to vote for us, right? We are the sane. We are the normal ones. We'll bring normalcy back to this country. People don't want normalcy. The status quo is leading to stagnating wages. It is leading to a lower standard of living and a higher cost of living for the average American. People want to have genuine change in this country, and they need people who are actually going to represent what that movement is. They want economic relief. They want lower costs. They want real material improvements. Because when people feel like the system is no longer working for them, they stop trusting the system entirely. The MAGA movement is ripping itself apart. Voters are starting to shift, and election confidence is collapsing across the country. The question isn't who's going to win the primary in Texas. The question is what happens when half the country doesn't believe in elections anymore? And will progressives take on the mantle of building that trust back in the American people?